Zada, Mr. Olatunga, and his band. I want you to give it up and give it a round of applause.
Oh, Jumbo. Welcome to Garvey's Ghost TV, January 22nd, 2022. A whole lot of 1, 0s, and 2s. Actually, 20? Yeah. 4 deuces. There are people who know why I'm pointing out 4 deuces. Anyway, notice there's no funny title, The Spanning the World, because we're going to cover stuff from all over the world, different topics, and so no snazzy stuff. As usual, this stream will be on BitChute, Rumble, and Odyssey, where apparently videos go to die. I guess I'm just not that popular. But anyway, that's not important. So you can catch it there if you don't want to give YouTube your attention. Also, yeah, that if you like. And without further ado, we're going to get into the first topic. Now we have a chart back here, and this chart is daily confirmed COVID-19 cases per million people. And this is going to be a good reference for some of the other stuff I'm going to point out. But if you look at the side, you see that we have the world and we have Israel. And the world is the orange reddish line at the bottom, and Israel is way up top behind me. So that's way up there. Okay. Israel is the most vaccinated country in the world. In fact, during the wave that you see, September, right there about September 12th, that line went straight up for its reference point. And if you notice, I put the timeline back to March of 2020. And look at what happened. No vaccine. And then, boom. Record number of cases. And they're on 4 shots. Now, this is the thing that's most interesting about this, right? They did 4th shot, and you'll notice, let's see if I zoom in. Yeah, we're going to zoom in here. And you notice there's a little dip right before the line continues to go straight up. I think that's when they started with shot number 4. I would say if I were an authority in Israel, I would look at, we started shot number 4, and instead of stuff going down, they went up. That something is very, very, very wrong with our program. That's what I would say looking at the data. But that's it. Now, there are doctors in Israel who are finally speaking out publicly because data like this is hard to ignore. And again, because of the internet, people can see for themselves. And you keep asking them to take shots and going for number 4, probably going to try and go for number 5, and they're seeing these cases still go up. What can I tell you? So this is just another reminder. We saw on my last episode or the episode before, trying to run out, their Pfizer CEO is saying, hey, the first 2 are don't do anything, right? They are ineffective against the current variant. The Pfizer CEO said this and has limited effectiveness against Delta. So if the CEO of one of the companies tells you directly, why do you have any country with any mandate and any passport? Now you see what's going on in the UK. So the UK has decided to drop all their restrictions. I think there's 2 reasons for this. One is the obvious data. Again, I just showed you all those cases. But secondly, we know that Boris is in trouble because he was partying while there was a lockdown for everybody else. And that's one of the things that I think this generation doesn't know, and the older generation forgot. That when you give these leaders power, what they do is make rules for you that they don't have to follow. Communism is good, but everybody at the top is being a capitalist. Socialism is good, but the people at the top are being capitalists. Everyone should be communal property, but I've got my palace over there, security guards and borders. Even Joe Biden, we'll get to this, where borders are bad. And then after January 6th, up goes the fence around the Capitol. That's what happens. So I think Boris is trying to keep his job by offering up the COVID restrictions so he doesn't get booted out. Whether that's successful, I don't know. That's the wrong reason to lift these restrictions, but we take the win when the win happens. So congratulations to the people in England, because UK is 4 different countries together. So the other places may not have such luck. Congratulations to Croatia, who have scrapped all their plans. And congratulations to Ireland, I believe has scrapped all their plans for COVID passports. So there are people being unshackled. They're gift me free. And I say, take the win, but don't forget, you got to hold these people accountable. They should not get away with what they did for the past 2 years. Now, going on to another topic. There was a recent decision out of Galveston, Texas, on one of Biden's executive orders. And this love of executive orders, we saw this with Obama. I think Obama was the last president who started out with, there are limitations on what the president can do. And then by the time he was out, soon before he left, it was, I have a phone and a pen. And this whole idea of kind of a king executive where I can just do stuff. And Joe Biden has taken that and run with it. Trump tried one. I think that was with his bump stock. But Trump didn't really do that. Although everyone was running around making him seem like he was the worst thing ever. He was the big autocrat dictator. Joe Biden has demonstrably shown that he has far more dictator leanings than Trump ever had. So we had another remand. So the OSHA one, we discussed that. That was put aside by the Supreme Court. The CMS they got because Congress did explicitly give the Secretary of the Health and Human Services the right to make such a claim. So you got stuck because Congress said this stuff. And so take that up with your congressperson. But there's another one that was the federal mandate. And this court case is what that one's about. And so this case, the United States District Court in Texas for the Southern District of Galveston. It's like we have the Southern District of New York. And just a couple of things here. The Executive Order 14043 amounts to a presidential mandate that all federal employees consent to vaccination against COVID-19 or lose their jobs. Because the president's authority is not that broad, this court will enjoin this second order's enforcement. So this is a nationwide injunction. The federal mandate for the time being is gone. And you look in some of the wording here. It was just explaining this about how the order had been enjoined by the Sixth Circuit, and it was nationwide. That's Georgia versus Biden. And some background. The mandate was on September 9th. And I'm going to go back to the chart here from Israel because we can see what was going on in September. And here's September 9 for Israel. So it was just finishing going through a Delta wave and was going to its second peak for Delta. And one of my things has been, if this is an actual emergency, it should have had an immediate effect. And that it didn't have an immediate effect kind of demonstrates that it's not an emergency in the way that they're claiming. So let's go back to this part. September 9th, federal mandate comes up, and they go through a bunch of stuff about what it should be. So one of the things, and this was a situation that refers to a situation that I'm in, where plaintiffs to wait to be fired to challenge the mandate would compel them to bet the farm by taking the violative action before testing the validity of the law. And that's kind of my situation where I have to let them fire me in order to show that I have damages. If you do it before, you run the risk of what this guy is saying, that, hey, yeah, they said they'd fire you, but they didn't. So because they didn't, you haven't actually suffered harm. So I'm glad that this is mentioned here in this court case, that the threat itself requires a huge gamble. Do I do it? And for an example, Starbucks had a mandate, and then after the Supreme Court decision, Starbucks dropped the mandate. And how many employees took the shot because they were scared of losing their jobs and whatever position. It's not just baristas. So how many of them took that only to find out now, oh, I didn't need to do it, right? So now they've taken a medication that could have done them permanent harm. And we're going to get to an example of that later. And had they waited it out, this may have happened. So this is a good thing that this court brought this up. And again, he points to the Fifth Circuit judge that held that the choice between one's job and their jabs is an irreparable injury. And I think a lot of companies are going to see this kind of language directed at them, I would say within the next 12 months. You're going to see a lot of court cases with the phrase irreparable injury. And that's all I'm going to say. So the other thing he said down here, again, this is another part. There's no legal remedy adequate that adequately protects the liberty interests of employees who must choose between violating a mandate or doubtful validity or consenting to an unwanted medical procedure that cannot be undone. And that's another thing I was saying. It cannot be undone. Once you've taken, this is not like NyQuil, and I used that example in a previous video. You see me holding the NyQuil. That NyQuil, you take it, it's a therapeutic. It does not keep you from getting a disease. It does not prevent you from spreading a disease. It just keeps the symptoms in check so you don't get a runaway fever, for example. All right. And these medicines are metabolized by the liver, and then you excrete them one way or the other. So those aren't permanent changes to your body. Whereas with an mRNA vaccine, and even a regular, vaccine, it induces your immune system to make a change that is permanent till you die. So that anytime a virus with a similar enough attributes come to your body, that your immune system says, hey, I know what that is. So it's a permanent change. And again, I think as more cases come up, you're going to see irreparable injury and something that cannot be undone. And that's going to weigh heavily on a lot of these court cases that I think are going to come up, especially as more evidence shows that these jabs, per the CDC, per Fauci, per the CEO of the company that produces one of them, that they are not effective against the latest variant. We have no idea how it's going to be against the next one. And given that this whole emergency, this can't stand. So the other thing I think I like this part, when an unlawful order bars those employees from significant employment opportunities in their chosen profession, the harm becomes irreparable. And that's another important item. Not only is taking a shot or these particular shots something that cannot be undone, and you have a risk of irreparable injury, the threat of not being able to be employed in your field because of the mandate, because a lot of companies do contract with the federal government. So essentially, if you live in Virginia or Maryland, for example, you may not be able to ever have a job because most jobs there are somehow connected with the federal government. If you're in DC, you probably couldn't work anyplace. And that's huge. And does the president have that authority? This judge says absolutely not. So he's enjoining that based on that. And you'll see this is why the OSHA decision was important. So he notes that the Supreme Court specifically held that COVID-19 is not a workplace risk, but rather a universal risk that is no different from the day-to-day dangers that all face from crime, air pollution, or any number of communicable diseases. That's huge to be on the record. So you have the Supreme Court ruling, and by the wording, and this is why it's very important to read the decisions, not just take the media summaries. And that's why I spend an hour and a half discussing the decisions, because specific language has impacts on other areas that you may not have thought of. It may not just be that OSHA didn't have the authority. They could say something within that decision that is also becomes grounds for a different kind of decision that's related. And this is a case of that. Once they said in the Supreme Court of the land that COVID is not a workplace risk, a business now faced with the lawsuit is going to have a hard time saying we did this for business purposes, because now the Supreme Court has yanked that rug from under you. Nope, not a business risk. You have to have some other reason. And that's going to leave a lot of employers liable. And as more decisions come down, there's going to be more cases with these precedents. And someone's going to break through. And once that first person breaks through, everybody else that did it. If I were an employer and I had a mandate, I'd drop it immediately and hope that nobody in my company got injured, and hope everyone's just happy to have a job. I would hope that's the case. But drop the mandate and suddenly just give out bonuses just for no reason. No reason. Unofficial hush money to the employees and hope they just don't say anything. I'm just saying, this is not legal advice. So I just wanted to bring that up because this decision is related and you should be aware of it. And you should, I would download this and put it in a file if I'm affected by this, if you're affected by this. The next thing, still a little bit of law. California, the state that continues to lead by example in just how far the clown show and the rabbit hole goes. Preteens may be vaccinated without parents' consent under California bill. Now, we have seen Democrats, it's no one else, so I'm going to pick on them. We have seen Democrats who apparently think that the state owns your children. And there's actually stuff from communism, which is where this is coming from, because a lot of these people are actual communists. I'm going to say it outright. I'm not going to say where I saw it, but I have seen HR department people with little red books. Okay, so I know for a fact that these organizations are infiltrated. So anyway, so we saw this most prominently in Virginia, where the guy had just left. I was bring his name up. He, not Northam, not Mr. Blackface or Klan. We don't know which one, but he's Blackface or Klan. And they let him get away with that. Just remember that. And he's a Democrat. And he was either Blackface or Klan. Okay. So anyway, so in that race, the idiot Democrat goes and says that parents should not have any say in the school's curriculum or what their kids learn. And he lost. Huge, big lead, even. So Youngkin is now in there. And the first thing he does, and I will note this is one of my biggest problems with Trump, when he talked a lot of stuff and then first day did nothing. But Youngkin, first day, boom, no more of that. And that's how you're supposed to do. First day, ding. And so these Democrats are doubling down because apparently losing elections is what they want to do, and they live in this little echo chamber where they think, what they just can't be wrong. So they double down, and here we have California saying, hey, your kids should be able to decide. But what else can they decide? And this is a part of that whole tranny thing, the LMNOPQRSTUV plus minus equal sign greater than sign people. What they want to do is get access to your children and make sure you can't object. And so the more laws that they pass that say your kid can do this, your kid can consent to that, becomes precedent for your kid can go and get hormone therapy and completely mess up puberty and be biologically messed up for the rest of their lives. Now, we've also had the assumption that children are not mature enough to make decisions because they don't understand the long-term consequences of those decisions, right? So, for example, statutory rape is because a child or minor cannot consent to sexual activity because they are not capable of understanding the long-term ramifications of that behavior, whether it be pregnancy, whether it be diseases, whether it just be emotional, what have you. So we say that children just can't, even though they can verbally say, hell yeah, we don't allow that. Well, if you have things like this, if a child can consent to a vaccine or whatever, then they can make other decisions. And trust me, there are a lot of pedophile organizations that are looking at this and going, yes, give them more decision-making powers, please. So the other thing, to make sure we understand that it's not just California. Alabama allows such decisions at age of 14, Oregon 15, Rhode Island and South Carolina at 16. I'll say 16 is probably the most acceptable because a lot of going back to the statutory rape things, 16 is usually the cutoff line. That's the minimum that I've seen. And I can see you making that. Yeah, they give people decision-making powers for other things at that age. But this whole 12, and here goes one where, according to sketch, a Democrat from San Francisco who's proposing change, only Washington, D.C. has a lower limit at age 11. You trust an 11-year-old to make permanent life medical decisions. DC, you want to make this a state. Weiner argues that California already allows those 12 and up to consent to the hepatitis B and HPV vaccines and to treatment for sexually transmitted infections, substance abuse, and mental disorders. And this goes to the point that I was making, right? They already allow children to bypass their parents to do all these other things. And because those things were not challenged and were not taken down either by the ballot box or through the courts, precedent. And you can't argue it. You already allowed it. You shouldn't have allowed it. You should have put the people who voted for that out of office. You should have put new people in office. They could be Democrats. I'm sure there are Democrats that don't approve of this. And then get the laws overturned. But you allowed the state to give your children the ability to go around you. What did you think was going to happen? And I'm telling you, pedophiles out here going, Yes, please give them more decision making abilities. Please, please. Because if they're mature enough to think about getting an HPV vaccine and to get treated for an STD, then clearly they are mature enough to make sexual decisions. I'm telling you, that's what's coming up. Keep letting the state let your children get around you, and that's what's going to happen. So this is a anyway. So this is not not strange. It's going to happen. They're just waiting. So there's that. Up next. Now, if you actually leave the house and buy your own food, depending on where you live, you've seen a couple of things. One, the prices of stuff have gone through the roof. Number two, shelves are empty. Now, I'm not going to exaggerate. Where I live right now, it's not that bad, but it's noticeable. If you pay attention, it's noticeable. And I'm talking about the bare shelves. The prices you can't avoid. What I could pay for $100 now doesn't happen. And so if you're on a really limited budget, you're hurting. Now, right now, I'm in North America, so we're in the winter. There is nothing growing. Nothing. Probably the only thing being produced is cow's milk. Because as long as the cow is pregnant, they'll produce milk year round. But fruits, vegetables, rice, all that stuff, it's not coming from inside. Stuff's got to be shipped in from places they can produce. And those places are south. And so you need trucks. Lots of trucks to get those things from there to here. Now, mind you, America has huge, very cold parts, and there are very warm parts. So there are areas of the country that can produce. But if you're in, say, Canada, basically Iceland, and I mean it in it's cold, not as Iceland, the country. You're growing nothing. Everything comes from somewhere south. So, given that there's a supply chain issue going on, and people need to eat, and car parts need to be delivered, and other things, the last set of people you want to mess with are truckers. N'est-ce pas? Well, according to the interwebs, Trudeau and Biden are dumb enough to actually put bigger squeeze on the supply chain by messing with the truckers. So, U.S. to close borders to unvaccinated Canadian Mexican truckers on Saturday. That is today. Now, you see, the reason why these leaders can make these decisions is because they don't shop for themselves. That's number one. They have people who do that stuff. the little people who drive to the supermarket or get on their e-bikes with the big boxes on the back and the yellow vests, and they bike from the supermarket to my house. And that assumes I even cook as a leader, because at certain points you have a chef and you have staff, and staff takes care of all of that for you. So food just magically appears on the table. You just wake up to the smell of bacon and eggs and chicken and rice and peas, right? You'd have to work for it. It just shows up. The people who live like that have no clue. And so they make these kind of decisions. So as of today, truckers who are unvaccinated, and I understand that's a lot of people, are going to be banned. And look at this. These updated travel requirements reflect the Biden-Harris administration's commitment to protecting public health. Public health. They're going to protect public health. Let's go back. Okay. Remember the chart. This is the chart. Israel. 4 shots and the world leading cases. How do you, knowing this information, make this stupid comment to protect public health? Like, are you telling me the truckers bringing in food and supplies resent of public health all this time? Are you serious? See, but when food just magically shows up in your fridge and on your table, you don't have to think about this kind of stuff. You just do it. So that's why I'm not surprised that they're doing this. Not surprised in the least bit. Public, while safely facilitating cross-border trade and travel that is critical to our economy. Yeah, okay. These restrictions, which apply to all foreign essential workers, have been expected since the U.S. officials. Whoa, what is this? Goodbye. Announced them in October, which gets to the point I made about the Texas thing. October. It's nearly February. If you had an actual emergency, that thing should have been immediate. Not months and months later. That's not how an emergency works. So, this is the border. COVID-19 vaccine mandates are coming to force sign pushback from the trucking industry. The people who kind of know about how this stuff works. The impact will be felt most acutely for the U.S.-Canada freight market, where around 160,000 truckers regularly cross the border, 75% of whom is Canadian. Already, capacity is tightened significantly with huge price increases in the spot market. It adds existing pressures, including COVID-19 itself, which left many fleets operating below full strength. The Canadian Trucking Alliance and American Trucking Alliance have projected that 10 to 15% of drivers may leave cross-border trucking as a result of mandates and exacerbate existing supply chain issues. Now, here's the thing that it's a bylaw, but on Monday, several dozen Canadian truckers protested near the U.S. border in Emerson, Manitoba. Well, let me tell you something. That's not all what's going on. There's a huge convoy headed to, I believe, Montreal. And their plan is to essentially blockade that city or province or what have you until either the mandates are dropped, or I think they said if the representatives, I forgot what they call them, resign. And a video I saw of a trucker said, "You all better go and buy food now." So to all my Canadian people watching, it's going to be a cold winter. Y'all have a longer winter than where I am. Y'all better put some pressure on your government people. They have no clue what they're doing. So you have that, and here's another report on. And Chrome, there we go. So this is the same thing here with the truckers. And again, I also want you to think about this, because this is important to understand. Car parts. So a lot of cars on the road are made in Canada and made in Mexico. A lot of parts are made in Canada and made in Mexico. So you might want to think that if you need a car part, or you need a new car, this could get really dicey because the trucker can't cross the border. And if they can't cross the border in either direction, when the product gets to the border, how does it cross? I mean, I'm pretty sure that as of right now, they can drive within the country, but when they get to the border, you unload the trailer and turn around, and exactly how does the trailer cross over? I'm just asking questions. So there's that. So now I'm going to go into a article about a person who died after receiving his third jab. And if you recall, I think it's 2 episodes ago, I discussed what pericarditis and myocarditis was. And this person unfortunately died. I believe this is a myocarditis. And I wanted to look over this because there were some things about that I wanted to discuss. And so this guy here, unfortunately, passed away from myocarditis as a result of his third jab. And that's not me just saying that. This is the autopsy report, and the certificate of death says Joseph, that's his name, died from severe heart damage from myocarditis in the left ventricle due to the recent Pfizer COVID-19 booster vaccine. So don't say I'm making medical misinformation. I am reading the article as it stands. So the thing with this one, he's 26 years old. And I just want to point out something about this. And this is not to drag on him or anybody else. There's an article on a post in my blog about skinny people who are metabolically fat. And what that means is that we tend to think of people who have serious metabolic issues as people who are just morbidly obese. They're just rolling in flaps. And that's not the case. There are people my size, okay, I'm not big at all, who are metabolically fat. This guy here, one of the first things I saw in the picture is I saw his momentum, and that's his belly area. he's actually carrying quite a bit for a 26-year-old. He should not be poking out his shirt like that. And I'm looking at his arms. They're very ill defined. Yes, so he's carrying a lot of fat around for his age. And again, this is not to knock him, and no disrespect to him and his family, but some people who think they're healthy, and this is why I seriously doubt every time I hear a report about the person had no medical histories and they were healthy with no problems, and I doubt that. Now I said I want to see their picture, and oftentimes when I see it, I can tell that they had some stuff coming, and he has it. That could be subcutaneous fat. I can't say that's what it is. It could also be omentum, which is below the muscle. That could also be a part of it. And especially for men, having a large omentum is a big deal. It's an indicator of impending heart issues. So it's entirely possible that this guy had a heart issue that was developing that he just didn't know. It was very early stages. And the Pfizer shot accelerated the problem that he already had. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm not making a diagnosis. There was an autopsy. I'm sure they know better than I do, but I'm just going off the observations and stuff that I've seen. It is clear from the picture that though he's not obese, he is overweight, and he is lacking in muscle tone. And that's an indicator to me that he doesn't necessarily have a healthy lifestyle. But 26, he should not look like that at 26 as a man, as long as he has no other problems that keeps him from exercising. So part of the things I want to say for those of you out there, if you're 26 and your shirt is poking, you might want to consider lifestyle changes now. So the other thing with this guy, so he didn't have adverse effects the first two shots. So he's saying his mother said her son was pro-vaccine. Nothing wrong with that. Here at the Ghost, we are not anti-vaccine in the general meaning. We are not that. Just make sure we're clear. So we're not knocking anybody. We're not knocking anybody for the medical decision. And he worked in an environment where he needed to be vaccinated. According to Joseph's vaccination cards, there's something I just want to stop on that. As someone pointed out, why do vaccine cards have so many spots on it? I mean, is there something they knew that they weren't telling why there were so many spots on it? And why did they need to put you in a database? See, one of the things that happened with me is the state of New Jersey keeps a database of everyone who got a shot. And so what they did is that even if you declined to disclose your information, they just went and looked it up. So was it always the plan to have some kind of passport system? And they used that to feed your information, which you gave up willingly when you got your shot, to implement it. I'm just putting that out there. So anyway, so he received his first Pfizer shot on March 26th, 2021. And this is going back to what I was saying about that court case, that it is a irreparable injury and cannot be undone. Now, he took his in March. Most people expect there to be an adverse effect right away. 24 hours, a week maybe. But his issue did not start right away. And this is my warning to people. You may be fine for a long time, and then suddenly. So look at this. So he said on March 26, 2021, he had his second dose on April 16th, right? Kaylin said her son, who did not experience any negative adverse effects after the first two doses, received a third booster dose on November 8th, 2021. So March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November. 9 months after his first shot. 6 months, no, 7 months, 8 months, because April 6th, that's a month later. 8 months later, 8 months after the second one, he's fine. He takes the third one. Boom. Now, there's this theory out there that because of the known rate of myocarditis, which you can look up in VAERS, and we discussed VAERS in an earlier video, that each shot has a multiplier effect. Every time it's like flipping a coin, right? The chances of getting heads or tail at any flip is 50%. If you flip it the first time and you get heads, let's say tails is where you get the heart problem, right? And it's not 50-50. So don't let me say I'm saying that, but I'm just giving a statistical example. So if you flip the coin and it's 50-50, and the first time you flipped it, you got tails, and the second time you flipped it, it's the same 50-50. The second time you get the tails, right? Same. The third time you get the head. It was still a 50-50 chance on that flip as an independent event that you could get that. But there's also a probability that increases as you go. So what's the odds of getting 3 tails in a row, right? Every time you flip, the chances of getting that next one, so 2 in a row, is roughly 30% less than the first flip. And then getting that third one is, again, another 30%. So the more you flip that coin, the more likely it is you're going to get ahead. Even though that flip is independent, 50-50, the fact is you can't continue to get tail after tail after tail. You must hit heads at some point. And so this is why you're hitting this 1, 2, 3, 4 every time. You avoided the bullet the first time. You avoided the bullet the second time. This guy didn't avoid it the third time. And that's another issue with these mandates, is this ongoing risk every time they change the definition of fully vaccinated. So anyway, going back to his issue, so they gave him hot cider. But he was saying he was exhausted. And when you have heart issues, that's one of the things, because your heart isn't working properly, you're not getting enough oxygen and all kind of stuff, so you feel fatigued. But I want to go to his Apple Watch settings, because this is interesting to me. As a person who runs, so they say they knew what time he died because his Apple Watch was recording, and then boom, it stopped. Now here's one thing they said. It showed his was beating at hundreds all day during the day, and after 6 p.m., when he sat in the recliner, his heart rate dropped into the 60s, which was low for Joseph, who always had a resting heart rate in the 80s and 90s, and then it just stopped. Now, I'm twice this guy's age. My resting heart rate is in the 50s. When I go to sleep, my resting heart rate drops into the 40s. When I read that this guy had a resting heart rate in the 80s and 90s, that alarm bells went off in my head, because that's high to me. I would be actually worried if I was sitting and just chilling. and was watching TV or reading a book, and my heart rate was in the 80s. So again, I was saying before, I think he had some heart issues that he didn't know about. The other thing is, if you look at some of his heart rate data, I mean, 9 o'clock in the morning, his heart rate was 145. So was he running? Was he doing some exercise? He has a lot of 131 at 4:47, 131 and at 4 p.m. He has a really high heart rate. So just to reference, again, I'm twice this guy's age. If my heart is beating 138, 140 beats per minute, 148 beat per minute, I'm running at about 7-minute 50-mile pace. That's running for me. I don't know what this guy was doing. Again, I saw this picture. I don't think he's running. Why is his heart rate that high? That kind of really stuck out at me. So I would have been worried because I saw such high heart rates. And I think they should have gotten medical attention, or they should have gone to a ER or something when they saw these 150s. Your heart rate just shouldn't be working that much doing normal exercise, normal stuff. I mean, if you're getting up off a floor or standing up real quick, your heart rate will spike real quick and then it'll drop back down. But walking upstairs, it could go up. It will go up. The amount depends on your fitness. But these, he went from at 10:19, he was at 146 beats per minute, and then dropped 20 minutes later to 71, and then 8 minutes later it's at 141. That's huge. What was he doing? What was going on? So I'll just say to you, I have my thing here, and I often check my heart rate. And if I see anything in the hundreds and I'm not doing anything, maybe my martial arts training or some working out, I don't want to see my heart rate in the hundreds. It just shouldn't be that high for just laying around. And so if you see heart rate data that's that high, please, and this is not medical advice, but contact your doctor. Just friendly advice. Again, I'm twice his age, and my numbers don't look anything like that. So, on to the next item. I'm going to go a bit long today. That's all right. That's all right. Dartmouth under fire for canceling a live event over Antifa threats. Do you remember when Joe Biden said that Antifa was an idea? Now, this is about Andy No, who has been a target of Antifa because he's been reporting on them extensively for years. How they are not a designated domestic terrorist group is beyond me. I have no idea how that's happened. But he was supposed to give a speech or presentation at Dartmouth. Now, the Supreme Court has weighed into this, and they have said, when I say this, what I mean is you cannot have a heckler's veto, right? A public institution cannot abridge someone's First Amendment rights due to the objection or threats by a third party. And that's considered a heckler's veto. And that these colleges and universities are not vigorously opposing these people, it bothers me. Because as far as I'm concerned, they shouldn't have canceled the event. The governor should have done what they did back in the civil rights movement when they integrated the Arkansas school, and they sent the infantry, or I think it's the airborne division, whatever it is. They sent soldiers with guns, and they should have sent the National Guard to the school and made it clear to any of the so-called Antifa people, as Dan Bongino calls them, Pantifa, and should any of them get out of line, you arrest them, and those who continue to struggle, just be done with it, right? We didn't tolerate that kind of stuff, abridging of people's rights back in the 50s. We said no to that, and they need to be stopped. And it's time for these universities to stop allowing these kinds of censorship to go on and these threats from these third parties. And those students, if they're students that are doing this, they get one warning. Okay, it's illegal and it's against our school policy. And the next time you involve yourself in that, you'll be expelled. No refund. We won't even release your credits. Goodbye. That's what needs to happen. And that's why I just pointed out, I've seen this so many times where a speaker gets something. There was a time where Charles Murray, I think it was Charles Murray, may not have been, but a speaker was at a university and he was assaulted. And they had to change buildings. And I'm saying to myself, no one was arrested. No one was expelled. They need to stop that. They need to stop coddling these people. They need to get serious and end that. Because the only reason why they keep doing it is because they get away with it. And then, as far as I'm concerned, this is just another Biden fail. But I'm going to put this on Trump too, because they were doing all this stuff during the Trump administration, and he should have done something about it. He had the power to do it, just like when they integrated the schools. You send the military in, and anyone who wants to deal with these, break these people's civil rights, we're gonna deal with them. That's that. So I had to put that on there. And lastly, we're going to get to the NYPD. NYPD shamed themselves once again. And this is a report from the Daily Mail, where NYPD arrested a girl who was at one of the New York museums and did not have a vaccine passport. And so Eric Bull Connor Adams, yes, that's what I said, Eric Bull Connor Adams, and his segregation that he kept from the Führer, the previous Führer, de Blasio. Both of them should be ashamed of themselves. Put that in there. And so the NYPD, again, because they've done this multiple times, arrested people protesting the vax mandate. And once again, because last time they harassed a child in a restaurant, and now they're arresting a child from a museum. And they should be ashamed of themselves. But they arrested this girl, and it was a protest. And I know their excuse is going to be, these people were trespassing, and we have to enforce trespassing. Well, these guys here were sitting in at a lunch counter back in the civil rights movement days. And back then you had the the whites only sections, and you had the colored sections. And if you were colored, like me, you couldn't sit in the whites only section. And so if you sat in this section, you were trespassing, because you weren't following the rules. And this is why I continue to say that the NYPD and Eric Bull Connor Adams should be ashamed of themselves for doing the same thing now and using that excuse, that sorry excuse that they're enforcing trespassing laws. I'll look you all dead in the face. You all should be ashamed of yourselves for doing this kind of behavior. And you think, I want to remind you, here is Dr.
Gundry, is it okay to eat almonds every day?
Oh goodness, we've got a no, I don't
Nuts
want
like walnuts and pistachios.
And now we have
super heart
pistachio.
healthy.
Okay, we're gonna
They've
skip
got
the
that
ads.
good fat that helps keep you full. And best of all, they help the
yeah,
body produce
we
butyrate,
gotta love this.
which may be one of the most important compounds
Miss.
for weight loss.
Skip. All right. Here's the PBA.
As we ran into this
President,
hospital,
listen to
today,
this
you
guy.
don't know what to expect, and there were
You know
hundreds
why
of
he's
police
mad?
officers running down the street,
That-
dropping their cars on the corner, running to this hospital. They were running to this hospital because they just carried two brothers out of a hallway into this hospital.
So this is the union, the PBA head honcho, standing next to Eric Bull Connor Adams, mad because 2 police officers were shot in Harlem yesterday. Now look, I don't think anyone should be shot, but I'm having a hard time having sympathy for the NYPD that enforces segregation in New York City. As long as the NYPD continues to support segregation in New York City, I don't care what happens to the officers. Do you hear that, Eric Bull Connor Adams and Mr. Union President? I don't care. Lynch, Patrick Lynch. Lynch, that's right, Lynch. I don't care. This guy talk. Look how mad he is. While
Hundreds and hundreds of police officers are standing here today because they're hard.
Yeah. Well, thousands and thousands of New Yorkers and people not from New York, but who come to the city are being discriminated against every day by your jackboot back thugs in blue who come and harass children trying to eat in restaurants because of Eric Bull Connor Adams and his segregation in New York City. What you should be doing is out in the street and mad because your officers are being asked to do immoral and un-American things. The only time you're mad is when it comes down to something that happened to your people. That you don't give a damn about the citizens of New York. It's all you care about. You got your little side cut from Adams. So now you want to talk about the police. This guy.
They have to be here because they feel like they're alone.
You feel like you're alone. How about that girl you arrested? How about that child that you harassed? Your officers harassed in a restaurant who was just trying to eat.
Got to end that here today.
Yeah. We need to end segregation in New York City today. Mr. Lynch, Eric Bull Connor Adams.
Hearts are broken. We're in shock. Our knees are buckling.
Your knees are buckling. I don't care. So long as you enforce segregation in New York City, I do not care.
And we're angry.
I
Because we've
don't
been here
care
before. We're
if you're
Because
angry.
we saw it coming. We're angry because
But we saw it coming. We saw the segregation coming. You saw the segregation coming. When did you stand up for the people of New York and say, our officers will not involve themselves in segregation in New York? No, Mr. Adams, we will not enforce trespassing in any establishment that has to do with a vax pass. We will not do that, and you will rescind that order if you want our cooperation. See, if this was a guy of principle, that's what he would have done. He would have seen him beforehand. No, he's only mad when the problems affect his people. Boo-hoo.
We said it was going to happen, and it happened again. So tonight, these police officers aren't going to sleep. They're going to be out.
So I'm just going to leave that because that's my feelings on it. Every time I see these police out there harassing people, children, over segregation, they have no sympathy for me. None. And yes, officers should not lose their lives while coming to the aid of someone in a domestic violence situation. They shouldn't lose their lives just sitting in their cars, minding their business. But as long as you involve yourself in segregation, you will not get any sympathy from me. And that's the end of Garvey's Ghost TV, January 22, 2022. 4 deuces. Ting and ting and ting.
How y'all doing out there tonight?